Welcome to the Norwich Bookstore. Isn't it great to have a full house with a local poet? A couple of housekeeping things. Exits are right here. There's a door over that way, and then there's the front door to the main street, and then there's the one that most of you came in with over there. Hopefully you won't need to use it, but we have to tell you. Please turn off your phones, and even if you can't stand how fabulous these poets are, don't tweet about it until it's done. Please.
Thank you, Donald.
No way, Jose. When we're through with the evening, in order to make some space in here so that people can mill around and get their books signed, if you could collapse your chairs. I can't show you how to do it, but a lot of you know how to collapse the chairs because we've given you lessons over the years. So if you don't know how, look at your neighbor and they'll show you what to do. But if you could you kick the back bottom rung and stick the chair against the wall, and it makes some room for people to move around. We have fabulous, fabulous cookies from King Arthur and cider in the front, so please don't leave the booksellers to have to eat them all when we're done. Okay, want to just tell you about two upcoming events. This Saturday is our second Saturday. We've got two nature writers. Mary Holland, who most of you know, has a new book, and she will be here with Michael Caduto from 10 to 12 on Saturday. It's not a sit-down thing. It's just to come on in, meet them, look at the book, and get it signed. And then that's Saturday coming. And then on November 15th, Pages in the Pub is happening. I'm not sure how many of you know about Pages in the Pub, but it's a really wonderful event that's now been going on for, 3, maybe even 4 years, maybe even 5 years, that two of our former booksellers started something called Lisa and the Book Jam a while ago, which is a book blog about books. And then they decided to have this event at the pub at the Norwich Inn, and we sell tickets. So it takes 60 people can get in, and you get, for your ticket, you get wine, and you get to hear total of 4 or 5 or 6 people, booksellers from here, and sometimes a few residents of Norwich, go through their favorite 4 or 5 books of the season for you to buy for holiday gifts. It's really a fun event, and it sells out quickly. So if anybody's interested in that, I suggest you sign up. You have to come and buy the tickets here. Okay, 2 poets, 2 women. Elizabeth is going to read first, but I'm going to give a short introduction of the 2 of them all at once so we don't have to pop up and down all the time. Elizabeth Powell's second book, I love this title, Willie Loman's Reckless Daughter, Living Truthfully Under Imaginary Circumstances, won the Robert Dana Prize in Poetry. A Pushcart Prize winner, Ms. Powell has also received a Vermont Council on the Arts grant and a Yaddo Fellowship. Her work has appeared in Alaska Quarterly Review, Black Warrior Review, Harvard Review, Indiana Review, Plowshares, and elsewhere. Born in New York City, she lives in Vermont and has lived here since 1989. Chelsea Woodard is the author of Solitary Bee, which came out this year, and Vellum, which came out in 2014. Her poems have appeared in the Three Penny Review, Southwest Review, Blackbird, American Life and Poetry, and elsewhere. Originally from the Upper Valley, and many of us knew her when she was, Chelsea received her MFA from Johns Hopkins and a PhD from the University of North Texas. She now lives and teaches in New Hampshire. Please, first of all, welcome Elizabeth.
Thank you for having me here. It's really a delight to be back in Norwich. My parents lived in Lyme for a long time. I like to say my dad, who this book is based on, still lives in Lyme. He just lives in the cemetery now. He used to like to say about people who'd passed away, they're not coming down to breakfast anymore. Yeah. He used to like to hang out with the guys at the hardware store in Lyme
Nichols.
Yeah, and drink his coffee in the morning. This book's based in part on Death of a Salesman. It imagines that Willie Loman has an affair when he has an affair with Miss Frances, the buyer, that a child is conceived. Many of you may know the play, Six Characters in Search of an Author by Luigi Pirandello, where the characters that he has erased take over a play. And so this imagines a female voice in Death of a Salesman, and it interweaves the story of my father, who had been a traveling salesman as well. One of my influences has been Robert Lowell, so this book opens on an essay, except this is a hybrid lyric essay, so I'll read that to you. Autocorrecting the lyric eye. I keep autocorrecting myself. I don't want to autocorrect myself. I autocorrect when I don't want to autocorrect. It disturbs the fusion of my interior monologue. I cannot keep up with how fast things are changing. If I use autocorrect, I am more suitable for you to see. I am dressed. I am not as naked as my fast typing might insist. Autocorrection is a kind of conspiracy theory of reality based on the probability of words and unnimble fingers. Thought is more easily rendered when you autocorrect. So it is said. But I know I am made from a God that makes homemade bread in the desert, even if he doesn't have yeast. I am not made of touchscreen typing, though it is a didactic consideration. My fusion is a kind of Cupertino, inserted into the narrative even though it was never meant to be there. Yet autocorrection is supposed to reduce the probability I am wrong to you in the way Cary Grant never seems wrong to anyone. When I autocorrect myself, it is better than back when I merely erased myself. There are many ways of erasure: deletion, drunk, disorderly, disintegration. Acting is a favored mode, and that's why I like theater, drama, monologue. I've had practice passing as a Jew and passing as a wasp because my math teacher explained that I am what used to be called in New York a Micmac. I've always been kind of good at doing this passing, though the one identity is always trying to autocorrect the other. Can you guess which parent of mine is a Jew, a Gentile? Let's say I'm fusion of cold borscht and finger sandwiches on white. I'm matzo ball, Jew bagel, and thrifty Campbell's soup with dried parsley, don't worry about me luncheon. I'm noodle kugel, and I'm turkey divan casserole. I'm bubbla, and I'm dearie. I'm ma, and I'm mummy. I'm the Episca Jew, and I am strong and not strong. I have a family tartan and the silence in a Vilna ghetto. I cannot be buried in the Holy Land, but I cannot be cremated. I am passing and have passed, have heard the murmurs of lovely and also dirty Jew, fucking Gentile. I have paid close attention to speech and learned how to autocorrect instantly, as quickly as fire, which used to follow me around like a strange cat. Fire on the Amtrak from D.C. to New York. Fire in the living room burning the shag rug. Fire on the mountain at the Dead shows. Now I just keep turning my words into something else beside fire, like someone with a personality disorder trying to make everything look good. It's humbling and uncool, but I keep trying to fill in the blanks of myself with words that keep changing. It is better, the Boston Brahmins say, to have a history, not a past, so when I speak in the eye, it must be my Jewish side. When I say that I'm a vaudeville act in a quiet New England house, I'm the daughter of the American Revolution, but in third-class steerage. I'm a debutante in the pogrom. I'm a morpher, like autocorrection. I've tried to make myself acceptable to both sides, literally. I am an Elizabeth. I autocorrect into electric, elsewhere. I am also Anne, and another. Powell, to power, to pose. In Hebrew, my name would be Bathsheba, bat label. Bathsheba becomes Banshee, battery. Also, I'm delighted. Cary Grant was Jewish, and Cary Grant was Church of England. He was perhaps the most successful autocorrector of all time. As a child, he imagined himself, circumcision and all, as an English gentleman, and so that is what he became. I pass, and I self-hate, and I take over the world with my great-grandfather's privilege and my great-grandmother's disappearance into the furnace of Eastern Europe with the protocols of the elders of Zion. In the fall of 1970, the orange moth-infested leaves made me scared of the sun. Under the modern swings with the new plastic seats, the Catholic boys kicked me for killing Christ, kicked me in the kilt and patent leathers, right in the belly where my button should be, dragged me by my strawberry blonde to find the horns underneath. I was stupid. I did not know my phone number yet. I was looking for my umbilical cord, but I had no umbilical cord, and my mother knew not why. When technology comes to help you, it usually has a darkness underneath. Think of Monopoly replacing gin rummy or Pampers causing asthma. No, technology could help me autocorrect the fact that I had lost my twin in utero. He had died at some point. He died before anyone but me knew he even existed. 4, 5 months. And it is said the remaining fetus absorbs the bones, blood, and memory of the other child. This happens all the time, like the way the word oligarchy autocorrects into democracy, and no one really thinks about it because they are typing their lives so fast they can hardly keep up with the minute hand. Another level of fusion. This is his fused monologue, too. I contain what might have been his speech, a kind of echolalia. This is also why I always thought I had done something terribly, horribly wrong. So when the Catholic boys told me I killed Christ, I believed them, not only metaphorically because we all have Pontius Pilate in us, but I also have my parents' first son inside my bones, and I miss him, and he contains an answer I need that has been autocorrected out of me to become a more pleasant word. Hence, another autocorrection. Though I keep writing umbilical cord, it keeps saying umbilicus or umbrella or sometimes umpire, who always says, "You're out." So then I decided I would write it out of the story so I could become my own doppelganger. Somehow, though, the doppelganger must be female. When I speak of him and for him, it is a female voice. Wherever his why went, I do not know, only God does, and that part is fine by me. Although for a long time it scared me. Like any minute I might autocorrect into something else and not know how or why and be stuck. It was a matter of who was in control of the autocorrect any given day. Ourselves, our gods, the global consciousness of the 60s and 70s seeping up all around my childhood. I had a terrible fear that even if I never drank booze again, I would suddenly be struck drunk from magic autocorrection and blackout and not know what I was doing. It was also a kind of OCD that survivors of twins and dead twins in utero have. I read all about it on the internet, so it must be true. I feared I might myself autocorrect the whole world, like a Pac-Man figure bent on some propulsion, much like an autocorrection that eats the world dot by pixelated dot. Hence, I am suppressing myself, and repressing myself. Ballet is the method I wanted for this expression of control, but my Jewish grandmother danced with Martha Graham. I was not allowed to be a ballerina. Autocorrection. I was a modern dancer morphing, backflipping into a gymnast. But when I started bleeding, I left it all to the large padded humiliation in my leotard and a bowl of hashish. Spent 3 hours with a box of Tampax, pure torture. These juxtapositions are creative memory, which is just another way to say autocorrection. Around then, I read my father's 1960s Compass copy of Arthur Miller's Death of a Salesman, and began to understand why his sister called him Willy Loman. He had eaten a dream, and it made him sick. I could hear my mother yelling, "No more 42nd Street hookers, no more secretaries." The dishes would fly. She'd announce, "I'm on my way to Mother's." That's when I noticed my doppelganger, under the bed, snoring, talking, laughing in her sleep. "How could you laugh?" I said in the morning. "How could you not?" she said. Some could argue it was a disjointed or multiple personality. It was around Passover and Easter when we, were raped by the drunken neighbor who tried to shoot his entire family because his wife modernized to using a potato peeler. I was so stupid, I still did not know my phone number. It was more about intermarriage and the space between Passover and Easter when my doppelganger rose from the dead like Lady Lazarus, and I didn't know if I should wear my cross or my Star of David. I didn't know, like Cary Grant did, that you could wear all the symbols on one gold chain if you wanted to. My intermarried parents were divorcing. Everything was splitting like a John Cheever story, where the wasps hung out drinking gin and tonics on the lawn. But my father's sister never stopped with the Willie Loman talk, and so we seemed to be acting that play as our family drama. I read it again and again until the doppelganger moved from under the bed to the top bunk. It is said in writing Death of a Salesman that Arthur Miller was moved by his intermarriage, and it made him think even more about assimilation. I'm sure he felt shame then about his Down syndrome child he kept secret and sent away. But it is always Biff Loman who has the most epiphanies on stage. Sometimes I think my brother, if he lived, might have been like Biff. Biff eats so much epiphany like birthday cake. He eats so much and leaves only a sliver. He's eaten all the buttercream roses before I can even enter the stage on the elevator from my hell of killing Jesus Christ by being the dregs of a legacy cured in bourbon old fashions off the island not far from Blue Hill, and having relatives who also chew chopped liver with mouths open. Biff can't hide who he is, even if he uses failure to try and do it. The lost father makes a lost son, assimilated or not. Like the rest of my immediate family, I am sure if Biff met me, he would not like me. I imagine him as a kind of brother, though. For him, my voice has always been and will be a kind of shh. I've been stuttering this out a syllable a day. That's my wage as an abandoned child. Suddenly it seemed everyone exited stage left and right, like the cartoon characters on the show I watched. I stayed home. I didn't want to ride over the Throg's Neck to Long Island, where the dichotomies amplified to extreme. I was afraid of bridges until I realized I had marched the Pettus Bridge in utero as my mother followed other marchers from behind in her knee socks and shorts and loafers and her secret gayness and dubious wasp empathy. Eventually, I grew up. For a long time, I didn't understand my narrative, so I yearned for a baby. When in doubt about the world, I liked to have babies and buy puppies. My retinal flashes made no sense until I realized they were someone else's story, trying to live through me. That sweet doppelganger, brother, sister, evil other, good girl. The story kept banging at my red front door, the one I painted red for good luck, behind which I lollygagged and sophatized as I proceeded with the CNN-induced lobotomy dream of life. From CNN, I learned autocorrect is a conspiracy theory because it keeps trying to change the truth. And I still didn't know my home phone number. When I let her, my other self, in the red door, she began dictating to me until we just used the auto dictation on my MacBook Air. Sometimes I am an Elizabeth. Sometimes she is a Bathsheba. I wanted to lie down in the back of my parents' 1970 Country Squire station wagon, back when they put the seats down and the children slept without seat belts through the interstate night. But they have long since ridden down that highway out of sight. Cary Grant once said, "I made the mistake of thinking that each of my wives was my mother, that there would never be a replacement once she left." I understand this. This is what has made me psychic. This is what makes images arrive on the doorstep with a bindle over the shoulder. Each man is the last man. I search Wikipedia for another answer. Autocorrection is a kind of data validation, which is the process of ensuring that a program operates on clean, correct, and useful data. It uses routines, often called validation rules, validation constraints, or check routines that check for correctness, meaningfulness, and security of data that are input to the system. Maybe my autocorrection has been a way for me to hide, to morph into whoever I was supposed to be in any given situation. The only thing I know is that Abraham is the only one who completely claims me in this story. I mean, in addition to God. The paradox of making a mockery of yourself, to become not a mockery of yourself, to devalue the capital of cool, to say, I am fucked up is as old or older than Robert Lowell. I want you to like me because je suis Robert Lowell. Let me say, though, that no one should autocorrect by killing themselves. So don't say, je suis Sylvia Plath. Say, je suis Robert Lowell. I love God this much. See my hands out as far as I can reach and farther. Let this typing autocorrect me closer to him. He alone can turn a bad world into something useful. Let my autocorrect be the way you batter my heart, three-personed God. Please fill in my blanks in a way that pleaseth you, my Lord, my one true only God, before any other gods. I don't want to say, can I get an autocorrection? I want to say, can I get an amen? Thank you.
Yeah.
I think this is okay. Can you hear me? Was this okay? Okay, great. It's so nice to be here in Norwich, and thank you, Liz, for that lovely poem. I feel like because there are so many friends and family members present who I know, I feel like I should give a disclaimer that this book, it's technically my second book, but in a lot of ways I think of it as my first. Many of the poems in the collection are about 8 years old and were part of an MFA, an early draft of an MFA thesis. Higher? Okay. No. Oh, yeah. I think I got it. Okay.
You got it?
How's this? Is that better? Okay. Great. So some of the poems are a bit dated, so I just feel like I should say that for those who know me. And I thought I would read the title poem first to explain why the book has the title that it does. And I always thought of bees as being very communal social creatures, thinking of all the drones and worker bees serving the queen. And I was doing some research one night and found that I was quite wrong. And so the epigraph for the poem is from the National Biological Information Infrastructure. And it reads, 85% of bees are solitary, meaning a single female mates with a male and then constructs, provisions, and lays an egg in each cell in a nest by itself. Solitary bees do not produce honey or wax, are relatively docile, and not apt to sting. Solitary bee. She builds her small apartment in a hollow reed, or tunnels underground. She makes no honey, but collects the lilac's nectar for her single brood. The garden stakes frame her reticulum of flight. Like knives, they caution rashness, keep her from the hives that coming in the apple tree outside. The throat can close or gape. She'll follow where the gardener weeds and sows the beds of foxglove, poppy, rose. A flower's bride, the bee maintains her pattern, flies unwed to any yearning, colony, or drone. She has no sting, but still the other bees will shun her, swarm, and guard their combs like jealous wives. I was very excited to see that my high school Latin teacher, who is really fantastic and transformational, Miss Cynthia Vaniolo, is here. And so I wanted to read a poem that's probably inspired by her because she's the one who taught me what the Ides of March was. And this poem was based on something I encountered, a scene I encountered once on the Ides of March that was very eerie. And it's called Ides. There is a flock pecking around the crabapple outside. I hear their fretful gobble. the toms perched on a low and trembling branch. I watch the snow drip to the ground, wait for the dog to bark, the heavy scene to topple. Gizzards boil in a black pot on my mother's stove. It is a German thing, she says, to eat of all the parts. The flesh is sinewy and firm. She cuts small bites for me, sprinkled with crushed thyme leaves, pepper, and salt. In Latin class, our teacher asked us to arrange the month into 3 sets of days. It is the middle, I remember, when the gold changed hands. My mother wore an old coin as a pendant on a thin filigree chain. The Romans read their fortunes in the flights of birds, but I can't guess what these bare tree limbs augur. The glutted flocks gone toward the woods, but every march I see the outline of their awkward bodies still, the muddy ground marking their place, the boughs emptied and scratching at the house all of these years like a reminder of forgotten debts. And because he's here, I thought I would read a poem that's dedicated to my father. And it's based on a story that's his story. It's not my story. And based on it. And was very much sort of a presence in our house growing up, but wasn't something that he talked about very much. And it's a sestina, and I know a lot of you probably know what that is, but in case anyone doesn't, it's a form where the same 6 N-words end every line in the poem. And my N-words are back, gun, wall, shot, fields, and church. It's called Things We Inherit. That day he couldn't do it. Walking back across the grass, his brother held a gun. The dog trailed after, keeping to the wall. My father watched his father down a shot of something, smoky, bitter. Ochre fields turned sparrow brown. They didn't go to church. The priest sat staring at the rain. The church was cold and everyone had left, gone back to Sunday's quiet hours, flooded fields and washed out roads where someone hid a gun behind a split rail fence. My father shot a rubber band that bounced back off the wall and dropped. He heard his parents through the wall. His mother yelled she would have joined the church. His father slurred her father would have shot him if he knew. Some things you can't take back. The boys all grown, and outside there's a gun wrapped in a cotton shirt. It guards the fields against the dark. My father crossed his field of vision on fogged glass. He felt the wall between the house and night, forgot the gun his brother carried, looking for a church key for his father's beer. His mother backed inside the kitchen, looking at a shot in black and white, the 4 of them. She shot a glance outside and saw the crying fields the water on the window made. Way back when she was young, she balanced on a wall and spread her arms like wings and wished the church could hold her weight. She didn't know the gun her eldest kept. He woke, picked up the gun. The light-filled morning didn't hear the shot. My father's mother rose and went to church. My father ran across the bladed fields. The priest leaned against the sun-warmed wall and wondered how could anyone come back. The church is shrouded over burning fields. My father hides the gun and swallows the shot. The wall lies stone by stone and doubles back. Because I don't want to leave her out either, I thought I would read a poem that's dedicated to my mother. My siblings and I often give her a hard time for the sometimes eccentric measures she will go to in order to help her friends. And this is based on one of those such examples. And I feel like I should also preface this by saying that this was written also at a time in my life where I was making very poor decisions in my in my romantic relationship. So I feel like I should say that as well. It's called Midwinter. Today, you'll help your pagan friend lift her dead dog's body to the highest branches of a maple tree. On the phone, you tell me it's the solstice. I should be ready. Today the light is shortest, and it's telling me to hurry as I sort the bottles to recycle, glass and plastic, slivered green. Your friend won't sell her house that's falling down or spend the time to fix it, but you'll help her put her mind to rest in bare limbs, closer to sky. The sun's climb already finished when I go outside to shovel snow from off the car and bring the paper in. I won't tell you that I haven't found a way to love so I don't waste or scrape the bottom. The granite step against the shovel blade. The year creaked shut with nothing gleaned. The women in our family kept the early frost from killing gardens, fenced the planted beds with chicken wire to keep the rabbits out in spring. No measures left against the time or weather as this year ends, you try to somehow make it up. You'll trail what someone else believes and haul the dead weight up the bowl. You'll take what little light is left to do your work, to wrap the bale twine tight around the sagging bones, your boots balanced on splayed branches, body braced above the gap. Several years ago, I was in St. Petersburg during the White Nights, where it never quite got dark, and it was a very cool but also very eerie time to be there. And so this was written while I was there. It's called Before the Solstice. We sucked the air out of the afternoon and locked the door. He didn't want to wait until the weather cleared, and so we huddled small against the church sides for the sun. Here, each figure is perfected, tree straight, with painted lips bit red. I walk, heavy-footed, through this city that's been strangled by a scarf. Inside my room, the tap will only drip. I write your absence into cold stone floors and cornered light. A gull trapped in the courtyard while it won't get dark, her beak stretched wide, screaming for water. In this poem, I have a younger sibling who lives in Argentina, and I wrote this and read it at his wedding. He's married to an Argentinian woman, and I've always admired the way that they try to kind of join and span their two worlds. So it's dedicated to them, and it's called Epithalamion. You brought her halfway up the world to see snow loading the fields, plowed into towering hedgerows, softening the edges of photographs of roads. She swept small angels on the lawn you left behind, lived 6 weeks in the rooms you'd visited in sleep, in dreams of birch and fire smoke, cold that leaves a body aching for the thaw. Hear your vowels slow. Here your tongue forgets the syllables of winter. She is what catches in the yard, a note that rounds the southern pole and holds. She is the longer light when ours grows old, the vow of warmer months, a song that knows of spanning distances, of snow. I'm just going to read 2 other short ones. This is the last poem in the book. It's actually a more recent poem. Where we live now, we have a lot of bats, and they come out every evening, and it looks like they're actually flying out from the eaves of the house. I'm not sure if they are, but once one was trapped inside with me. This is called The Bat. Downstairs, above my writing desk, her body flitted overhead without my knowing. Something moth-like, a momentary shadow on the ceiling light, a breath. It took 6 passes for her presence to take shape, for me to look from where I bent to see the furry underside, her brown wings beating silent in this strange, narrow enclosure, brushing neither the window nor the wall, calm almost, as if she trusted something in kind in here would free her. Heard long before I opened it, the sudden door leading her back into the dark. This is the last poem I'll read. A few years ago, my parents sold the house that they had lived in for 35, 30, 40, 38, something, many, many years. And so this sort of remembers what that process was like. It's called Metronome. Years after the piano tuner came last, and at last convinced us that the sound had gone out of the strings, the bass bridge, and long after the sheet music was shoved in the seat of the bench, Christmas carols and scales, minuets played for hours in a room overshadowed by lilacs. After the upright was rolled out of the house as we readied to sell, the beat-keeper still looks from the mantel. So many minutes stand dumb to the pendulum talk of that old-fashioned instrument left out for show. The unruly notes are swept up, the melodies I learn by heart. This gadget now measures only in intervals of hush, and like the emptied house, keeps counsel by itself. Listens inside somewhere from a dark corner where the lull has set, and where I can't remember the time. The music. Thank you.